Hello and welcome to In Her Time, brought to you by Amnesty International Zimbabwe. I'm your host Nicole Madziwa, and in studio today we're commemorating the International Day to End Obstetric Fistula. And for this discussion, I'm joined by Amnesty International Zimbabwe Gender and Intersectional Justice campaigner Rachel Jambo. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us again. It's good to see you.
It's good seeing you again as well, Nicole. Thank you for having us.
I know that with this word, I mean this word, Rachel, this word. But you know what, for the benefit of our viewers who obviously are going to bear with me, I think they will understand how difficult it is to pronounce obstetric fistula.
Yeah.
So I think we'll just dive into it. What is obstetric fistula?
Right, okay, thank you, Nicole. And I think I'll keep going a bit slowly so that the audience can also catch up. It's obstetric fistula, or we can just say fistula for short. So to start off this condition, we have a research that we did as Amnesty International. It's called Lost Without Knowledge. I didn't know I could get healed from this. It's available for download on our website. And from our research and also other medical experts, what we then discovered is that obstetric fistula is a severe childbirth related injury. And from our research, we were then guided to know that it usually affects women and girls from rural communities and from poorer households. So what it is, it's caused by prolonged child labor. And when we say prolonged child labor, that's labor that goes for maybe 2 days or more, 2 days going up, and your labor is obstructed, which means the baby perhaps is bridged or it's just not coming out the normal way that it's supposed to come out. And what that then causes is it causes a hole in either your bladder or your vaginal canal or your rectum, where you normally wouldn't have had a hole, and then that then results in continence. And what we mean by continence is uncontrollable leaking of urine and feces, or both. It could either be urine, feces, or both from the vaginal canal. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go just sideways a little bit from what you just said. Are there a lot of women that are affected by fistula, and would you maybe have the certain age groups that it really affects?
Okay, so thank you for that insightful question, Nicole. Definitely, yes. So the nature of obstetric fistula is a very sensitive condition, number one. Number two, not a lot of knowledge goes around, especially in the communities that are most affected by this. So when we're talking about numbers, we do not specifically, when I say we, I don't just mean Amnesty International, I also mean the Ministry of Health. We don't have up-to-date figures, or we don't have current figures of the extent of the number of people that have this condition annually. You'll see as the discussion goes, there's a lot of factors around that, why it then becomes almost a secret pandemic that people suffer with. But otherwise, we do know, if you then do the research, statistics coming in from UNIFPA indicate that as of 2021, more than 7,000 women had received treatment for this condition. Yes, and then the age groups, anyone from age-bearing age, really. I think some of the youngest cases we've heard about is as young as 15 or 16 years old.
Wow.
Yes.
So is it possible to prevent fistula?
Definitely. So remember the causes that I mentioned. So for you to prevent something, you need to understand the causes. And some of the causes, like I mentioned, you have prolonged obstructed labor. Number two, you have a lack of emergency obstetric care. What do we mean? During childbirth, a lot of complications can happen, and if you don't have access to certain equipments that you'd find in a hospital facility, if you don't have access to your doctor, to nurses, to even a simple machine, because if you do a scan will be able to let you know that your baby is bridged, and we need to do an emergency C-section. So if you don't have access to those facilities, that also contributes to obstetric fistula. And it goes back to the population that I talked about earlier, to say a lot of the cases we hear of in rural communities where the hospital is 30 kilometers away. So those are some of the causes. And then last but not least, another major cause of obstetric fistula is child marriages. Young girls getting married, below the age of legal majority, they fall pregnant and they're then forced to give birth. We need to understand that just because a young girl at 15 years old is getting her period does not mean that her body has developed to carry a pregnancy full term and to push and deliver. Their pelvic bones would not have developed. So these are some of the major contributing factors to obstetric fistula. So how do we prevent it? First and foremost, family planning. Family planning and access to maternal health, that's very key. When we talk about maternal health, we're talking about your pre and postnatal care, because during the progression of your pregnancy, your doctors and your nurses will be able to pick up if there's something that could be a cause for concern when you get into labor, all right? And then obviously we need access to emergency obstetric care, because a lot of the victims that suffer from obstetric fistula are in the rural areas. A lot of them, they go and give birth. In Shona, they call it kwana nyamukuta, which are, most of them, they're just old aunties, old grannies that have experience helping people give birth, not because they were trained or have a certificate, but because they've done it so often, they now roundabout know what to do, but should there be an emergency, they don't have the capacity or the facilities to respond to that emergency, which then leads to someone being in prolonged labor. And then the last thing to prevent obstetric fistula is to put an end to child marriages, because little girls below 18 do not have the strength to carry a pregnancy full term, give birth, and endure motherhood.
Right. Wow. That's a lot.
That's
a lot.
Yeah.
And it's very informative, because many times, like what you're saying, if you go to certain communities, they believe that if you go kuna it's okay. It's okay. But once a complication then happens, then they're not equipped enough to deal with the issue. So once someone gets fistula, is it treated?
Okay.
And if so, how?
All right. So I think I'll just start by saying fistula can be treated, it can be prevented. But should you have someone who suffers from so it can be treated. The Ministry of Health and Childcare, they run fistula restore camps periodically. I think they're trying to do it once every quarter this year. Last year, I think they were doing it biannually. So just depending on capacity and all that. So they do run obstetric fistula restore camps in Chinoi and in Masvingo. The entire bill is catered for by the Ministry of Health, so that means it's free of charge to the patient or to the victim. They pay for it. All you need to do is call their toll-free number, which is 08080231. I'll go again, 08080231. So you call toll free, and there'll be someone who will be able to assist you. They will book you, so they will cover everything from your travel. Doesn't matter where in the country you are. They will pay for your bus fare, they will pay for your accommodation, they will pay for your surgery. They'll make sure they handle everything.
That's amazing.
Yes, it is.
That's
I think
amazing.
it's an amazing.
I think even for the benefit of our viewers, we'll just put the number on the screen, so that they just know how they can be assisted and some of the services that they can get.
Yes,
definitely. Right. So I think we'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll look into how fistula it's linked to mental health and also other surrounding issues around obstetric fistula. Let's take a quick break.
Hey everybody, my name is Taff and I am your host every Tuesday at 2 p.m. for Mental Health Watch Show, where we discuss everything mental health. And you know what? We make it so simple. We break down the big terms and make it palatable for you and I to understand, and so as much as to reduce the stigma. So do join us every Tuesday at 2 p.m. You know the place to be. It's Mental Health Watch on Heart and Soul.
Welcome back to In Her Time, brought to you by Amnesty International Zimbabwe, and today we are talking about fistula, particularly obstetric fistula, and the causes and prevention. And in studio with me, if you're joining us, is Jambo, and we're talking about what it is and how you can get help if you have it. So before we went for the break, I know that we said once we come back, we're going to talk about fistula's link to mental health. So maybe if you could just explain to us exactly what happens and what it's like.
Thank you. So I think the second segment is where I'm way more passionate about, because I know initially we were doing the technicalities, the definition, the symptoms, the causes, and so when we're talking about mental health, I always like to when I'm doing my community dialogues and interacting with the community, I always like to say, just take a deep breath and close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're a woman, you've just given birth, maybe you're 6 weeks postpartum, and everywhere you go, you're continuously leaking urine. Everywhere you go, you're continuously leaking feces from holes you're not supposed to be leaking. Sorry. What will that do to your psyche? All right. I know in our research, we had one of the key informers in the research was a lady who had suffered from obstetric fistula for over 40 years. And she says, a simple situation like she wants to travel from her hometown to come to Harare, where other people just think to hustle for a bus fare, she thinks about way more. She doesn't eat 2 days before the journey starts.
Wow.
Because if you eat, what happens? It's going to come out, right? And remember, these, like I mentioned earlier, this condition is affecting women and girls with in poorer households where they cannot, it's a luxury to think about adult diapers. It's a luxury to even think about maternal pads, right? So what does what options are available? Many of these women end up using rags and t-shirts. How long, if you have a rag or a t-shirt in between your legs for even 3-4 hours, what is that doing? It breeds bacteria, it breeds blisters. So this then becomes a roller effect of so many other interconnected issues that start to come up in the rural areas, because this condition is not understood. A lot of, and usually it starts with the women, women on women hate, where they say you are bewitched, wakaroiwa. Unotadza kuzvara the way other women vanozvara. Why? You're bewitched, you were lazy to push during child labor. So in your psyche, you get a lot of psychological and emotional distress, right? You start to feel perhaps you're not woman enough, because why is it that you were trying to just do the normal thing every other woman seems to be able to do, and yet now you are suffering, Imagine a life where you're leaking every day, every single day. What does that say about your social interactions? Someone who has obstetric fistula cannot comfortably sit in a classroom if it's a young child who gave birth young. How does she go back to school and sit in class with everyone else? If it's a young woman, how do you go to church? Even kumadzimai, how do you go kumadzimai? Even if you're a vendor, how do you go and sell your product when it smells all around you? There's people that have made jokes with even if you're a vendor, sewage, and yet it's not sewage, it's this condition, that you're living in. And let's not forget our realities in Zimbabwe. If you're in a rural area, or if you're of a poorer background, access to water is difficult. So how many times a day can you afford to take a bath to ensure that you're clean? What does that speak to in terms of your relationship, even with your husband, with your spouse? Remember, these liquids and fluids are flowing now out of the vaginal canal. Will you be able to meet your marital obligations? That opens up a lot of women to domestic violence, because the men themselves don't understand. A lot of the men then say, "Uchapwa, you're not bathing, you're not cleaning yourself." Better if a man sends you back to your parents' house and you go back to your parents, but most of them, they end up just being violated at home, domestic violence. So it opens up a person to a world of extreme psychological and emotional distress, such that if you don't get counseling, if you don't get this information about the condition that you're suffering with, it's years and years of just depression and anxiety and social exclusion.
Wow. This is a human issue.
This
is a human issue, and it affects everybody.
Yes,
it's not just because this is a woman's issue, and because that condition affects them, but it has ripple effects even in the society itself. And I think this is one of the reasons that why Amnesty International Zimbabwe is doing this, because also to conscientize our audiences that are watching,
definitely,
that this is actually real and it happens, and there's no shame. If it happens to you, you can actually get help. So what is the link? Because we're talking about it being a human issue. So what is the link between fistula and human rights?
Okay. So I think maybe as I answer that question that you just asked, I want to put a more relatable face to the case. All right. for our audience, and I hope we do after this segment, people do go out and look for this information and see some of the scary statistics that are coming from the Ministry of Health. I know when we started the series, I was using statistics from last year that weren't too comprehensive. Now, darling, there's scarier statistics. I think right now the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education is estimating that as the end of from I think mid last year into this year where we currently are, over 50,000 girls fell pregnant and dropped out of school. And we're talking primary and high school. In primary school, I think they have over 18,000 cases, right? Primary school, these are pregnant girls. And if you remember some of the causes of fistula that I mentioned, young girls giving birth before their bodies are ready, right? So we have the pandemic of adolescent pregnancies in the country currently. We have religious and cultural groups that don't ascribe to your modern health facilities. They believe in traditional home-based remedies. They believe in ananyamukuta, all right? And most of these groups are the same groups that are, marrying off little girls in childbirth. So I want to paint a picture where you have all of these women that are potentially vulnerable to incurring this injury during childbirth, not knowing what this childbirth injury is, and yet being in environments where they could directly be. I think it's very important for me to highlight that this is not obstetric fistula isn't a freak accident. It's not a 1 in a million cases. It is more common than we can even document, but because it's so sensitive, a lot of women, they're very secretive about it. I always tell people in the communities, if you're ever in a room full of a lot of women, if you sense that you're just smelling urine everywhere, chances are highly likely there's someone who is suffering from obstetric fistula. If you're with a group of women and you're constantly getting a whiff of feces or urine, chances are highly likely, that's usually the telltale sign, the smell that follows them. But how it then becomes a human rights issue, I outlined the psychological impact, the emotional impact. It goes down to your how it's a human rights issue. It goes down, if we're talking about little girls, rights to education. How does a little girl who's 9 years old, and these stories are not freak stories, they've been in the headlines. We know about Memoli Machaya, we know about Nokutenda, young girls, you're married at a very young age, 14, 15 years old, you give birth, you get obstetric fistula. How do you go back to school? We know the realities in schools. Children bully amongst themselves. There's a lot of stigma, so what does that say about your right to education? You can't continue and finish off your education, all right? What does that say to your about your right to health? You can't, like I mentioned, one of the ladies that informed our research, she thought about it like, okay, I do need assistance, but there's certain things I need to stop beforehand before I can go there. So your right to health care, we need to talk about your dignity. It is a right in our constitution. You have a right to dignity, and if you are constantly leaking, all right, if you're constantly smelling around people, are you going to be treated the same? Obviously not, right? Especially in a community where people don't understand your condition, what it is, all right? What does that say about your right to dignity? What does that say about your right to employment? I remember in my earlier example, I mentioned, even if you're a vendor, how do you sell your product when the space around you does not smell hygienic, it does not smell clean, right? Let's not even talk about, being a vendor, even to be a house girl. How do you go and work in someone's house? Like, how can you go and be someone's helper when you're constantly leaking and when you're smelling? That just essentially means you can't have a job of your own, all right? You're secluded for the rest of your life until or if you get assistance. And that makes you overly dependent on your partner. Right. It could be your husband, and if he doesn't understand and he isn't supportive, that opens the gateway to domestic violence. You're going to be overly dependent on your family, if you have family there, standing in the gap, helping you. But in essence, it becomes a human rights issue because it takes away all sense of autonomy, all sense of independence, any hope for self-development, going into the future, because essentially you are socially excluded from any meaningful interactions with anyone.
And it's not even by choice.
It's not even by choice.
It's because of a condition.
Yes.
Wow. So you just mentioned how the society, us as a society, in our communities, we tend to shy away from from people with fistula because we don't understand, you know, and there's just a lot of ideas that then come up and terms that we give people that have this condition. So what can we do? What can we do to ensure that everyone, you know, is on the same page and we understand the same way? If we see someone who can't help themselves, we don't laugh. But, you know, we know that they didn't choose this.
Yes.
It just happened to them. So what can we do?
Right. Okay. So I think as I answer that, I'll just start by saying the World Fistula Day, or the day to commemorate World Obstetric Fistula, is actually the 23rd of May, which is today. So today we are commemorating it. But how everyone can actually get involved is, I think the first thing is awareness raising. Awareness raising is extremely important. Get information and share with as many people as you can. You never know that Magogo at the store would be able to share that information, you know, with someone. You might be sharing that information with her and she's thinking, oh, I know someone from my village who seems to exhibit these symptoms, and, you know, so definitely let's raise a lot of awareness. Let's raise a lot of awareness in our different spaces. That's number one. And then number two, which is the most important thing and what, you know, I'm extremely passionate about, is let's speak out against child marriages. You know, in the communities that I always go to, I always say, listen, just because your child has fallen pregnant out of wedlock does not mean it's the end of the world. And by law, it does not mean that she qualifies to be a wife if she's under 18. Let's take care of our children. If they fall out of pregnancy, let's make sure they get the proper pre and postnatal care. Let's not go to backdoor nurses, backdoor doctors. Let's go to the medical facilities and get the help that we need throughout the pregnancy. And we make sure when it's time to give birth, we are in a medical facility. All right. But I think that's about the most we can get involved in. Yes,
right.
yeah.
And would you have any last words for our viewers that are watching right now? If, you know, they're saying, okay, so today we understand, and now we know that we are commemorating, you know, Fistula, International Day to End Fistula.
Yes.
So would you have any last parting words to our audience?
Yes, definitely. I think I'll just say, and I want to say it in Shona, Fistula, hakuzi, kuroiwa, because I know that's something that comes out quite a bit. Fistula, hakuzi, kuroiwa. Fistula is avoidable. Let us protect especially the girl child, our baby girls. Let us not allow our baby girls that are pregnant to go and give birth outside of medical facilities. Otherwise, we run the risk of them, you know, incurring this injury. But otherwise, fistula can be prevented. Fistula can be stopped. So let's spread the word and let's help each other make this world a better place.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We really learned a lot. I'll just reiterate and take that again. Guys, fistula kuroiwa, and we need to do better. We need to be kind to one another, and we need to do right by each other. And so if you know someone with fistula, or if you know the assistance that they can get, I know we just once again put the number on the screen so that when they see it, they can actually get assistance. So for me, Nicole Madziwa and Rachel Jambo, I think it's goodbye.